Hello students, in this video I'm going to discuss uh, your course which is related to your second semester. I hope you must have done your papers well and now the classes have begun. Now what I thought that before I start my class, let me discuss uh, in brief the course which is prescribed in this semester. So this paper is, paper one, British poetry of the Victorian and modern age. Now, before I, explain the topics prescribed here in this course, I would like to draw your attention to the syllabus of the first semester. So in this slide, you'll find out at a glance the topics which were prescribed in your first semester. You started with Chaucer, that is a poet of 14th century. Then you studied Marvell, 17th century, Donne, 17th century, Milton, 17th century, Pope's The Rape of the Lock, 18th century. Then you studied William Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley, and Keats, the Romantic poets, that early part of the 19th century. Now, in continuation with this, in this semester, you have the poems, the poets belonging to the later part of the 19th century and the 20th century. So that is, this course is based on the Victorian poets and the modern poets. Now the purpose of such kind of portion is to make students acquainted with the development of the British poetry from the 14th century till modern times. You study Chaucer, and then you are studying the modern poets in this semester. Later part of the 19th century, Victorian Age, and the modern poets. Now, this first unit, we the three poets: Tennyson, Browning, and Arnold. These are the three poets belonging to the later part of the 19th century, that is Victorian Age. Alfred Lord Tennyson, Robert Browning, and Matthew Arnold. One poem of Tennyson, Maud the Arthur, Browning's Rabbi Ben Ezra, and then the Scholar Gypsy of Matthew Arnold. So before you study these poets, I suggest you to read the background of the Victorian Age. Tennyson is the most representative poet of the Victorian Age. How has he depicted the Victorian Age is in Maud D. Arthur? He's a great lyrical poet, Nobel laureate. Robert Browning, who is a poet of love and optimism, and Matthew Arnold, who is a melancholic poet. So when you study the background of the Victorian Age, then you will come to know how two poets writing at the same time are different in mood and temperament. Browning, for example, a poet of optimism, which you will find out in Rabbi Ben Ezra, and Matthew Arnold, an elegiac poet, you will find it out in the Scholar Gypsy. You will also find out how Browning developed a dramatic monologue, a poetic, device. So we learn all these points in this unit. But you need to know the important characteristics of the Victorian age. And all these three poets are the representative poets of the Victorian age. Now, poet who connects Victorian age with the modern times is G.M. Hopkins. You must have heard the curtil sonnets. You must have heard the sprung rhythm. Now, these terms, curtil sonnets, sprung rhythm, you will find out in connection with, Hopkins. And so many times, the term sprung rhythm was asked in the examination that who, used the term sprung rhythm. G.M. Hopkins, the poem Windover. And then immediately you'll come to the modern times. W. Bates and T.S. Eliot. These two poets who belong to the first 2 decades of the 20th century. W. Bates Selling to Byzantium and the Byzantium. These two Byzantium poems are prescribed in the course. And then Eliot's masterpiece, The Wasteland, published in 1922. So, W. Bates and T.S. Eliot, these are the two most representative poets of the first 2 decades of the 20th century. So, you're going to learn the important changes because these are the poets who started writing after the First World War. So, what are the changes in the modern times? You'll find out in the writings of these two poets. Unit 3, Dylan Thomas and Philip Larkin. Now, Dylan Thomas is a poet of 1940s and Philip Larkin is a poet of 1950s. So, you are going to study a poet of 20s in the case of T.S. Eliot and W. Bates, then 40s Dylan Thomas, then 50s Philip Larkin. Dylan Thomas, these two poems, Refusal to Mourn the Death by Fire of a Child in London and Poem in October. These are the two poems of Dylan Thomas which are prescribed. And the three poems, The Church Going, The Whitsun Wedding, and Toads. These poems of Philip Larkin are prescribed. Larkin, who is a moment poet, developed into the poetry of the 1950s. In Unit 4, we have Ted Hughes and we have Seamus Heaney. Ted Hughes, again a poet of 1950s. Ted Hughes, who is famous for his famous for the theme of the violence and the animal imagery. He's an animal poet. And we have the three important poems of Ted Hughes: Hawk Roosting, The Thought Fox, and October Dawn. These are the three poems of Ted Hughes, which are prescribed. And then we have one, Irish poet. W. Bates is an Irish poet. And then we have Seamus Heaney, two poems, Digging and Punishment. So, in this semester, you are going to study the poetry of the later part of the 19th century and the modern poetry. Modern poetry, say up to 1950s, with the poets of the 20s, with the poets of 40s, with the poets of 50s, and we have Irish poet also as Seamus Heaney. So, in order to have a better understanding of the poetry of this paper, you are suggested to study the background also. As I told you, the case of the Victorian Age, you should study the background of the Victorian Age, and you should also know the trends in 20th century poetry. That is also very important. So, if it is possible, I will make a video on trends in 20th century poetry, and then I'll start discussing the poets. So, this much in this video. In next video, I shall try to discuss trends in 20th century poetry. Thank you very much.